Chuck's here. I'd like to call this work session to order, October 15th, 2019. Official time is 5:01. I guess we don't need approval of agenda. I just want to welcome everybody to the work session. And if our audience is ready, we will,
Y'all ready?
y'all ready? We'll let Jason start.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, want to start talking about the SPLOST that would take effect in 2021 if approved by the voters. For today, I just thought I'd like to get the group to start discussing or determining a timeline for that 2021 SPLOST referendum, and also discussing or determining a process for evaluating proposed projects. So what sort of process you want to use to, have department heads come in and share their requests, or how you want to go about generating projects and considering them. Before we get to those things, I wanted to kind of go through just some basic SPLOST information with you, and then we'll get back around to discussing those things if that's okay. And y'all stop me if you have questions or comments or anything as we go through this. But as you know, I think SPLOST is levied on anything that is charged sales and use tax. It's also levied on food, non-alcoholic and alcoholic beverages, which is a distinction from regular sales tax. And it's levied on the sales of motor fuels as a prepaid local tax, so it's collected at the distributor level. Generally speaking, you can levy a SPLOST for up to 5 years. If you enter into an intergovernmental agreement with your municipality, you can impose the tax for 6 years, or in the absence of an intergovernmental agreement, if you have level 1 countywide projects that require more than 24 months of estimated revenues, you can go to 6 years. We'll talk more about that level 1 projects later on. But those are the two ways that you can get to 6 years. The current SPLOST is a 6-year SPLOST that was the result of an intergovernmental agreement between the county and the city. So there are some required steps. This is all taken from the ACCG SPLOST guide, that if you happen to print that out for y'all, or you can get to it on the ACCG website. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Step 1 is meet and confer. So at least 30 days before the election superintendent issues the call for the referendum, you'll have a meeting with, in our case, the city of Gray, to discuss possible projects. You got to send them a notice 10 days prior to that. That meeting and meetings after that can be used to negotiate an intergovernmental agreement. And the law says that you can proceed without an intergovernmental agreement if the negotiations fail, if it's unlikely that you could negotiate one, or if only level 1 projects are to be included. Step 2 is that this board would adopt a resolution. So after you compile a list of projects, you'll adopt either an ordinance or a resolution. I think a resolution in our case, calling for the imposition of the tax. In that resolution, you have to outline the county and municipal projects, the estimated cost of each of those projects, and then the time period for the levy, if it's a 5-year or 6-year levy. So after you adopt that resolution, the resolution has to be sent over to the election superintendent, who issues the call for the election. State law lays out either 2 or 3 days per year on which you could hold a special election with a SPLOST referendum. And the election will have to be at least 29 days after the date of the call for the election. So those numbers will become important as we start trying to back into when we have to have all of this done. So in odd numbered years, you can hold a SPLOST referendum on the 3rd Tuesday in March, or on the Tuesday after the 1st Monday in November, which would be your general election. Even numbered years, so if, we're talking, realistically, we're talking 2020. Even numbered years, you can hold it on the date of the presidential preference primary, the date of the general primary, or the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. You have to, there's a required public notice, 4 weeks of publication in the newspaper. If general obligation debt is going to be included, then that information also has to be included in your public notice. Georgia law lays out what language you include in the ballot, in the ballot question. It has to include the total estimated revenue amount, general list of all the proposed projects, and a time period for the tax. And then step 6 is the consideration and hopefully approval of the entire project list by the voters. State law doesn't allow them to pick and choose projects. It's an all or nothing proposition. So some additional considerations that would trigger some additional requirements. If you wanted to include the issuance of general obligation debt for some of those SPLOST projects, there are some additional requirements that would be triggered there. And then if you had infeasible projects from a prior SPLOST, that would also trigger some additional requirements. Let's see. And the infeasible projects is if you had a project from a prior SPLOST that had become impractical for some reason, and you didn't plan to do it, if it had become infeasible, you basically have to ask the voters for permission not to do it. Otherwise, you're essentially bound to the list that was approved in some form or fashion. Obviously, there can be tweaks here and there, but there is a procedure if you have a project that was infeasible in a prior SPLOST for getting approval to do something different with that money.
The general obligated debt was like what we've got now with jailhouse and the rec center?
Actually, those don't count as general obligation debt. Those are lease purchases, and the way state law is written, they don't qualify as general obligation debt. For SPLOST purposes, a lot of times you'll see, and in our current SPLOST, we have language that approved up to, I have it here, maybe $4 million, or let's see. There was an amount in the current SPLOST that was approved to be issued as bonds.
It's usually in that big paragraph with all the
Yeah,
itemized.
here it is, $4 million. Now, the county did not exercise that bonding ability, but that would be included in your ballot question and that kind of thing, to issue general obligation bonds to be repaid with SPLOST.
And if you don't have that in the referendum, you can't issue them.
Right.
But if you have it in there, you don't have to issue them.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, you know, and if you didn't have that in there, then one of your potential financing mechanisms is gone. You know, and I think one of the nice things about including that language is that you can go ahead and sell the bonds. My understanding, and I'm not a bond attorney, but my understanding is you can go ahead and sell the bonds as soon as the SPLOST is approved. So in theory, you know, if you had the SPLOST approved in 2020, you could go ahead to the bond market and you go ahead and get the proceeds that are paid back with SPLOST funds, you know, over the 6 years, but you can go ahead and get your projects moving. So some communities do that. If approval or disapproval of the levy, if approved, the SPLOST would begin on the first day of the next calendar quarter, beginning more than 80 days after the election. So you count 80 days after the election date, and then the start of whatever quarter is next after that is when it would start. And that's important because you know, hopefully you time it up where you don't have a lapse of it and then it picks back up again. I think that's good from our standpoint, and probably preferred by vendors too, so that they don't have to go in and back a penny out of all their software and then put it back in, you know, a few months later. If the vote fails, you have to wait 12 months to do another SPOS referendum. So,
So if, and ours will end December 31st, 2020, right?
no, this one ends June 30th, 2021.
Okay. I was thinking, because if that was the case, we needed to back up before November to be able to have it January 1, but if we go in November, we still can have it. Because I know you can go early, you can have it approved a year in advance, you just can't collect it until yours stops.
Right,
The
right.
year stops, okay.
Yeah. The current one was approved by voters in 2014. I think in May of 2014, as best I could tell. And it took effect on July 1st of 2015. So it was about a year early.
What kind of margin did it have on approval?
I'll have to check that and see.
I mean, I ain't trying to, overload your boat, but I just
No,
curious.
I'll check and see.
Marion should have it, and I would look at the last 5 years and see, or last 4 or 5 fall.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you a good idea of, I know usually pretty close. I know in VIA, it's been between 70 and 73 approval.
Oh,
The
okay.
last 5 campaigns.
Yeah.
I don't think, ours is probably closer than that, but.
One other thing I wanted to, okay, one more thing here, and then I'll go back to that. Let's see. There are 2 methods for determining how you share revenues between the city and the county.
Do or don't.
So the one method is by an intergovernmental agreement where you negotiate something with them. The other is by a population-based formula in the absence of an intergovernmental agreement. So if you can't strike a deal with them, then it sort of defaults to a population-based formula for how you divvy it up. I don't have this in the packet, but something to think about. The level 1 projects that I mentioned earlier, there are certain things that qualify as a level 1 project. A jail, a courthouse, an administrative building, hospital. There may be one other thing that falls into that category. Those are considered level 1 countywide projects. If the law says if your entire SPOS was devoted to level 1 countywide projects, then it could be a purely county thing. And that also comes into play if you don't have an intergovernmental agreement, but those level 1 projects would take up 24 months of collections, then that gets you to a 6th year of collections. So those are some areas where that comes into play. And in terms of figuring out percentages and that kind of thing, generally money for those countywide projects kind of comes off the top because they are countywide in impact, and then whatever percentage comes from the remaining portion. One thing that I wanted to suggest to y'all today was, as we start talking about projects and that kind of thing, rather than just saying we're going to collect $13 million or some number, a way that I've seen it done before is doing tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 projects. So if you achieve 1% growth, something, some sort of conservative growth number, or 0 growth, you could say. Tier 1 projects would be accomplished with that amount. If you get to 5% growth and you collect an additional $600,000, then that second $600,000 chunk would be used for your tier 2 projects. So you come up with that much in tier 2 projects when you're putting it together. And then tier 3 might be a 5% growth, year over year. So Another $600,000, say, just for round numbers, and so there's tier 3 projects, you would have $600,000 worth that would only be done, you know, if you hit 5% growth and collected that higher amount. So that helps you kind of prioritize your projects as you go through the process and know what you want to do for absolute certain and what you only want to do if, you know, you have really good collections. So that's just one potential approach that I have seen done before and thought worked pretty well. So sort of back to our goals for today, I kind of wanted to get y'all's thoughts on a timeline for that referendum. If y'all had a you know, particular target date you wanted to shoot for, you thought would be better or worse, and then, you know, whatever process you want to use for evaluating proposed projects that are needed around the county. So, thoughts on those things?
Sam, you working on this now with Board of Education?
I have 1 more month, 3 more weeks. So, yeah, 20 more days. Well, I think we would be better off to go either in the March, before November of next year, because you're gonna get, once you get past the primaries, you're gonna have a lot of negative campaigns when you get in, especially in the presidential race next year. Probably some state races, maybe not local, you know, but some state races are probably gonna be heavily contested, and the more negative it gets, the more the average person gets turned off from, you know, either voting altogether or just gets a negative attitude with all the mudslinging. And so the statistics that we've seen show that SPLOST outside of presidential years votes do better, so which is why we went early this year. But yeah, I would say March or May or whatever we can go next year, is it March, in the even years that we can go. I'd say we shoot for that.
Yeah, you could either do the presidential primary date or the general primary date.
So, what's that, May and July, presidential and then November. So you got 3 even number, you presidential primary, general primary, or general election day. So when is presidential preference? Is that March or May?
You find it?
Presidential preference primary would be March 24th, and then general primary would be May 19th.
Well, Florida's on March 17th, yeah. So March and July. Okay. May would be the runoff from the first one, yeah. Okay, March or July. And July wouldn't be, that would give us a little more time to figure out what we're gonna do, get prices, and still have our meetings with the city and all that. Maybe no voters will be on vacation.
The only thing I can think of that might, God forbid it fails, then you have to wait until you'd end up having a lapse for some period of time in 2021, like mid-2021. I mean, hopefully that won't happen, but.
Well, yeah, so if we do it in March, we would have to wait till the fall. Well, in odd years, we would have, the third Tuesday, it's the third Tuesday of March, so yeah. So March 24th of this year, and that way, if for some reason it fails, you got March to try again, but we don't have, but you still got 80 days from the time it's approved, right? Yeah, you still be all right. July 1.
They gonna give it,
Yeah, July 1 starts the next quarter, so yeah, that would be right.
to shoot for March, they're gonna be enough time to put everything together?
October, I would think so.
So you just did it,
Do it less than 2 months, yeah.
so you did it in 2 months?
Yeah, less than 2 months, yeah. You can do it.
You got
We need to,
a good coach, he's already been there, done that.
Well, we gotta get busy on the, prioritizing our wish list. I think that's gonna be the biggest thing, cause if you get out in front of the voters too late, you're gonna get blamed for, well, what are you trying to hide, you know? You waited until, you didn't give us time to look it over and vet it and think about it and talk about it. So have we got 10-year data on what we gonna set on the collections?
I can pull it real quick from the
Okay.
Department of Revenue.
We probably need 10-year revenues, average revenues, 10 years. That'll show us what our growth has been over, up and down over the last 10 years. Give a conservative, because I think, the other thing we probably need to see is how much wiggle room have we given in the last, because if you're gonna collect, if you say you're gonna collect 12 million and you just put 12 million on a referendum, when you get to 12 million, you gotta stop. So to get to that tier 2 that you're talking about, you probably wanna go 10% over.
Right.
Or some number over what you think you're gonna get.
Yeah,
So you may wanna put 15 million, that we cut off at 15 million, but thinking we're gonna get 12.
yeah. Another benefit of the intergovernmental agreement method is that, my understanding is that with the intergovernmental agreement, if you exceed what you stated in your referendum, you still get to keep collecting. If you don't have an intergovernmental agreement and you get to that $12 million, whatever it is, it stops.
Yeah, I guess you're right, because I've been dealing with consolidated governments or school systems, because there's no shared,
Oh, yeah.
there's no shared revenue there. That's all fine. Don't touch it. Do we know what the split's been the last, is it going along service delivery lines, or is it going by population lines? Or?
I want to say it's 18.5% now, but.
I thought it was 17.
Service delivery is 17.5 and 82.5 or something like that.
17, I thought it was 17 and a half, something like that.
87.5 or something. 17.5.
Yeah. I was thinking it was 17.
It's too much.
It's too much.
I've just been educated on loss training. They don't stand a chance. No, when will the results for the 2020 census be out?
17.5. I think it may be in 2020. I want to say I heard maybe third quarter of 2020 you'll start getting some numbers there.
So we will have already had to have the agreement, the vote and everything else by then. Because nobody knows whether it's gonna go one way or the other,
Yeah.
increase or decrease on either side, so.
What sort of process do you all want to use for getting department heads in here? Do you want to have a next session where you have department heads come and present their ideas, or how how do y'all wanna handle that?
I had been thinking all along that we're gonna need to, well, personally, I think we need to know what we gotta do, and then take the wish list of the departments after
Mhm.
that, because we know we've been talking about jail, courthouse, and then infrastructure, you know, whether it's water or sewer or whatever for a long time. We keep saying, you know, push it off to the next boss, push off, you know, and I don't know how much we're obligated for debt service.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think that needs to come off the top until we get to a, and if it's 5 million or 8 million or whatever we got left, then we start looking at priority. And I guess all those would be level one. Where does debt service fall in? Is it level one or level two? Or?
I think, and I'll check on this, but I think if it's debt service on a level one,
Project,
Project.
still level one?
yeah.
Gotcha. And see, that wouldn't help with like recreation
Right.
where we've done that. And that wasn't, so there wasn't no legal obligation for SPOS to pay that. It's just a debt service that either you can pay it out of SPOS or you can pay it out of general.
Right. Same with the jail. Yeah. We're servicing that at general fund right now.
That's how we got out of obligating future boards.
And there's
Future
a,
SPOS folks.
they always put a non-appropriation provision in those things. It says if you didn't approve the debt service payments every year, then they can come back and take whatever. But, you know, in most cases, there's nothing they can really come back and take. But I think they feel comfortable enough with those governments.
They'll put all that water back in the ground.
That's
and
right.
pull down.
Yeah, I think, I should have printed off a little list. So that's one thing to think about is, you know, when it comes to debt service on the jail and recreation complex, do you want to allocate enough to just go ahead and pay them off completely, which I think, that would be my personal recommendation to you, but just to get those out of the way. Or do you just allocate enough to continue servicing the debt, and then you have to come back to it again in 6 years and figure out how you're gonna keep paying? So that's something for y'all to think about, you know, through the process. Do you wanna go ahead and plug enough in to pay those off, or do you just wanna plug in the debt service amount?
Well, I think we weigh that against, if one of our projects, just say we had to have the courthouse renovation is a must, and we decide to pay off all the debt, the debt service, and we don't have enough left for the jail, you know, construction and then other, whatever we vote on else, then we go right back into a debt situation. Service financing the project there. But, you know, side two of that is, you know, rates are a heck of a lot better now than they might have been when we got the debt for recreation too.
You know, I think on a, you know, on a project that, which of course projects can be narrowed in scope, but I think when you're talking about something like the courthouse, either an expansion or, you know, and there's several different options there, but, you know, that may be a size project that you have to look at splitting out over a couple different spots. You know, you just do the debt service out of this one and then plan to wipe it out with the next one, or something like that. There's a lot of different ways you could do it.
Yeah, I kinda I didn't expect to be able to pay for an expansion of a courthouse and or a jail and or debt consolidation or debt service. We're probably gonna have to service the debt we got, re-up and service that too, like you said, to move the projects projects forward. But I do think we need to commit, I mean, I see a lot of, hey, I need a piece of equipment. How you gonna pay for it? Well, I got some SPOS money left over. That, I don't know, that bothers me to say, I got some SPOS money left over. That was not the intent to have some left over. You know, we shouldn't have money left over because that makes us look bad, that we didn't plan for it right, or they convinced us of a need that might not have fully been there.
Sorry, I didn't.
No, I'm listening. You know, but go back to the borrow money or whatnot. I think one of the, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the main things they taught us right at the beginning when we did our newly elected is beware of putting debt service on a SPOS because there's no guarantees it's gonna be here tomorrow. I kinda like the idea of, you know, if we got some debt service on there right now, which would be the rec complex. I don't know what we left over on it. If we could go ahead and knock it out, I guess the jail would be another one.
Yeah.
We got those off the SPOS as far as, you know, depending on this, because, you know, if it don't go through, the money's gotta come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's when you know, bring a community to their knees right quick or at your throat one, right, because you just had to raise some taxes to.
Well, the way it stands right now, we got the debt that we gotta pay.
Yeah.
We got that debt we gotta service. And if we agree and say that we gotta expand the courthouse or we gotta expand the jail, you know, if we get into a court mandate where we've gotta do it, well, then we gotta do this and we gotta do this. So, that, you know, it kinda takes out of the equation of whether we do it by SPOS or do it by general fund, 'cause doing it.
Yeah.
But I agree, you don't, I mean, I agree 100%. I don't like asking the people to fund something now, way out here, you know, because all they're funding is right now. And, but we know we've gotten bigger needs, and I guess I was saying, I don't like seeing us pay for things now that were not in the original plan, or, you know, it's a fine line to be generic enough that you're not hand-tied to a project, and the track is a prime example. There was some discrepancy over whether it's a $300,000 track or a $4 million track. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
And, you know, 300,000 is what we got, and, you know, we don't have a $4 million track. And so, had we been obligated to a $4 million track, we'd be looking for ways to fund it.
Right.
So if we tie our hands on a specific, something too specific, but if you use it generically, like, I'll just say safety equipment, or public works equipment, or recreation equipment, that can be really, really generic. You can buy everything from a pickup to a bulldozer to a new public works building, you know.
To your point, I think, you know, in some instances, the generic thing can work out to your favor if you have unexpected things that come up and that kind of thing, but, I think maybe a sort of a hybrid approach where you still leave yourself some flexibility, but at the same time, you plan out exactly what is gonna be used with those. I mean, you could, you know, in terms of the language you put in the intergovernmental agreement and the language in the referendum, you can, you know, tend to be a little more generic with that, but maybe we have an internal working list that we've developed through this project, or through this process, that, where you know, if there's $950,000 and, you know, for some particular purpose, you know exactly what's gonna be bought with that. You know, this many, this type fire trucks, and this many of this type, and this many of this type, or, you know, whatever the case may be. You've got an internal working document where all that is laid out in great detail. And,
The way I have to do it now is I have every department send me their wish list. And it can be 35 objects on there. Knowing good and well, we probably can't fund but 5 or 6 of them. But they put the wish list, you know, like buses, when they're gonna buy buses, he'll put on, I need 110 buses. Well, we've never bought more than 10 a year, so if you buy 10 every year, that's only 50. So knowing we're not gonna get that many, but put them on the list, prioritize your list of what's your highest need, and then go down that list, the internal list, like you said. Now, I know, and we'll probably get some direction from our attorney, but you can't just put a contingency fund in SPOS. But you can put what they call a recommended contingency per project. So if you got $1 million and it's 10% contingency, you know, you can put the contingency and then combine all your projects. If you got 10 projects and it's $1 million in contingency, then that's a contingency for those projects. You know, if they come in budget and under budget, then that contingency falls into a category that you can use for something else. But what we did was stuff like security upgrades. That's something that is specific enough that you know it's got to have to do with safety. But it can also be generic enough where it can be for fire department, sheriff's department, public works, you know, recreation, because you can literally put up back nets on a softball field under a security upgrade because you're securing, you know, it's a safety issue. The same as a sheriff's car or the same as a fire truck. Instead of dividing it up into 4 departments that way. So I think we need to get our priority list first from the departments and go from there.
I don't think necessarily, unless y'all think different, that we need to call each one of them in and go through it. Just have them give us a, you know, like Sam said, a priority list, wish list, and that way the board can look at it and go over it and do like we've done in the past and say, okay, we got some highlights. And, yeah, I can think of several now. You know, with Dawn and the fire trucks and stuff like that, infrastructure, other things that we know we need.
I was gonna say, we surely need to include Tim, Tim Ingram.
I think Jason does a pretty good job of the budget stuff. I think he'll whittle it down and bring that to us.
He ain't got nothing to do. It ain't like he got anything to do.
I know, I mean, I've been looking at that stack on his desk, it just gets smaller and smaller.
It's that nice little cuticle Tommy had him built over there. He ain't organized now.
I know, he might as well, he
I'm
covered
afraid
vacation about
stuff's
3
gonna
times
fall
a
off the
week.
desk and hurt somebody.
I spent about a day and a half, a few weeks ago, going through all that stuff. I ain't even organized the files on my computer. If nothing else, I'm organized. Temporarily.
Any input from our audience?
I guess the voters decide who wants to.
Come on forward so we can hear you. You got an echo back there. Some of us can't hear it and the other can't.
I guess depending on how it's worded, what's gonna get the voters excited to want to come out and support it?
Let's say that's the $12 million question.
And I keep going back to what my dad says and my grandmother said and grandfather before they passed away was, make me trust that you're gonna do what you said you were gonna do with that work, with that money. I'm not just giving you money and then you get dependent on it. And your dad said the same thing. Y'all, and my dad's probably we probably don't need to get him to advertise for us for this flaws, because he'll tell you y'all are too dependent on it. Y'all need to tighten your belt and quit worrying about the splosh all the time. But, you know, he does agree that it's the best way to keep in rural counties when we don't have enough retail or commercial to make a difference. It is the best way to get projects funded without the local taxpayers footing the bill on all of it.
Well, I know the last one was regional, where we were in with several other counties, correct?
That was T-Splosh.
The road.
Yeah,
road
I'm
tax.
thinking of T-Splosh, but people voted that down pretty hard here in this county, didn't they?
Well, the 1,200 votes separated a approval. Wasn't it 1,200, that's close it was? But a
Yeah,
lot
and
of
that-
people weren't educated on it, but, you know.
And that one's hard for us to argue against, because people are arguing that, you know, how the gas tax is split up and how the state divvies up taxes that go to each county, and we have no control over it, so we really can't argue that point to people when their complaint is state-driven. We can't argue it from a local level to say, but vote for it anyway, or.
People definitely needs to be educated on it.
Yeah.
'Cause most people see SPOS, and they might see general terms of something, well, how does that benefit me? But unless they're educated on what it really means and what we've got to do, then we're not going to be as apt to want to vote for it. That's all it is.
Well, the best bet for doing that is gonna be social media, because there's been meetings, there's been advertised, come and learn, come and voice your opinion, and you might have a handful of people show up at the Civic Center,
Same two
Yeah.
or three, yeah.
and they're not educated. How do they find out that they can be educated on the SPOS to start with? So,
Not everybody's on
It's gonna
social
be-
media.
no, they
That's a
don't, but more of them use
Good
it
place
than,
to put it, though,
more of them
absolutely.
use social media than any other way.
Can you do, direct mail to registered voters?
You have to be careful about, we can't use taxpayer money to advocate for or against.
Right.
What we can do though is you can tell people you can explain it to people.
Yeah,
And so,
right.
you know, obviously there's kind of a fine line there,
Yeah.
but yeah, you can explain what the projects are, how the tax works, you know, what the projects would do to benefit them. You know, obviously you don't want to cross the line over to being, you know, salesy, kind of thing, but so you just have to find where that line is, and just can't use taxpayer resources to advocate for or against.
That's it.
I tell you what we do now, and I have to do like about 3 a week, is they have, and we, for the school system, have, chairing, 2 co-chairs of the East Boston campaign. And those are, from the community, they have nothing to do with school, their businesses in the community. And they have volunteered to have a SPOS campaign. So they go out and solicit the funds to advertise and the funds to have these events where then they invite us to come, and all I do is go with a PowerPoint presentation to show, here's what's been built with your SPOS money, and here's the list of things that we're asking for the next SPOS to
Yeah.
build. And all I do is present it and sit down, and if they have any questions, you know, why are you gonna build this one? Here's why it's needed, here's what the
Yeah.
numbers say, here's what, but, yeah, you're right, I can't ask anybody to vote for it, or ask them for money for it, or buy signs, hang signs, any of that kind of stuff, but, hello.
In some places, you know, you'll see, they're not trying to put the chamber on the spot or anything, but you'll see a Chamber of Commerce, you know, the campaign. I know over in the Augusta area, when that P-SPOS thing first came up, the chamber over there went, put up signs at all the things that would be improved, and said,
Right.
you know, if you approve T-SPOS, this bridge will be replaced. This intersection will be improved, or that kind of thing, but it was all private money, and it was all done by the chamber. Sometimes you'll have more often you hear a group springing up against something, but periodically you'll have one that'll spring up in favor, and they'll do some things to help promote it.
I hope we, get down to the priorities, cause I sure hate for us to get to a mandated situation where we.
Right.
Is there anything else on this?
Courthouse committee, do we have good numbers on, cause I know we had talked about this, then back to this.
We had a meeting, about a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. And there's some different options, that we have there, and, you know, one of them is certainly adding on to the existing facility. Another, is, you know, there could potentially be land available across the street that we could acquire, to do a facility there. And still use the historic courthouse, for different purposes, but maybe have some of those functions in a new facility across the street. And so that's a potential option, and, you know, sometimes it's cheaper just to build something, maybe not a new, you know, maybe called the courthouse annex or something like that across the street.
Yeah, cause that one is on it's on the historic registry and on the, and in the district. So it's, yeah, I think it's got the plaque on it, so everything you do, it's gonna have to be time specific.
I think Bob Brown had done some conceptual drawings of an addition onto that building. And then we started looking at some options of maybe going across the street and doing something, you know, still keeping that building operational. I think, you know, no one on that committee wants to see it become a museum like a lot of old town you drive through where it's just, you know, maintained by the, whatever historical society. I don't think any of us want to see that.
No, it's too nice of a functional building for that.
I think at some point that group might like to come before you and talk to you, you know, about their thoughts, and they've put a lot of work into it over a number of years, I think. And I think how much money y'all are willing to allocate towards that can sort of drive which option, you know, they want to pursue there.
So we need to have a work session again next meeting for the list.
So if it's okay, I can contact the department heads, get them to submit to me a list, and try to get that into format to present to y'all at the next meeting.
Will be all right?
Is that best?
Yeah.
Well, is that November 5th, cause that's election day, so we can have it before, I guess, yeah. Just gotta be careful of people trying to get that vote in right there before 7 o'clock.
Anything else from the work session?
And I'm going to a celebration
Yeah.
party afterwards. No, I'm good.
Everybody good to adjourn?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Motion to adjourn, Chairman.
All right, second, everybody, we're good.